two things. First, we're shaking down a brand new video camera. Haven't touched this thing before today. Took me 3 takes to figure out how to make the mic work. Took another one to figure out how to lock down the white balance, but we're getting there. And then the more exciting stuff, probably from your perspective, is that we will be cleaning up a couple of cast iron skillets that Hannah found at secondhand stores. The first is this cute little lodge here, and you can see it's pretty rusty on the inside and pretty rusty on the outside. Tiny little lodge. This was only $3 at Savers. I think that it's got this raised ring around the outside, so I think this means it's an older piece. This is designed to sit in the little lids that would pop up on wood-burning stoves. And then, this is a little bit more. This was a $13 skillet, but this is a Wagner. Right? This is one of those pieces that cast iron enthusiasts dream about finding. Just looking at it, it is much thinner and lighter than contemporary production cast iron. We are going to use an electrolysis tank to clean the rust and the old seasoning off of these guys. Then we'll re-season them in the oven using some canola oil, and then we will see what deliciousness we can bake in them in the days to come. So let's see what happens. My electrolysis tank is going to consist of just this big plastic Tupperware thing. We've got a bunch of these lying around the house. We bought them for storage solutions. I have a stick. This actually, if you look closely, you'll find that there are bullet holes in it. This used to be part of the target frame. And my theory is that I'm just going to lay the stick across the top like this. And then I'm going to sink a couple of wood screws into the underside, like so, here, and also over here. So this will keep the stick from sliding back and forth and inadvertently dropping down in there. And I've got one of these horseshoe brackets that I'm going to put through the stick, like so, and I'm going to hang an S-hook on that, and my cast iron will hang from the S-hook down into the tank. And that should give me some degree of, the ability to control the depth of it without having to add or subtract fluid once I get the thing filled. So this goes on, and it won't slip side to side, but it will travel this way, which is good. It'll let me control the slack. And then take our little Wagner, and you can see that's suspended pretty nicely. It does make contact with the bottom, so maybe we'll heighten that thing up a bit. I think we'll have even more of the same problem with the sorry, that was the Lodge. I think we'll have more of the same problem with the Wagner. So just tighten this guy all the way down. Alright. Try with our bigger skillet here. Okay. So again, I can run that for a while on one side, and I'll run it again on the other side. I might need to bend that S-hook just a little bit. What remains is to put in the sacrificial anode. I've got this hunk of rusty old steel rod that my friend Cliff gave to me. This is perfect. It's just going to lie in there. The power supply will clamp to it nicely. Just to make sure that it doesn't go traveling on me. I don't want it falling and touching the skillet. I'm going to stick a C-clamp here on the side as just sort of a barrier, so that'll stop it from falling forward. Now we need to fill this with an electrolyte solution so that it'll facilitate the electricity moving through and carrying the particles off the cast iron. The internet all agrees that this stuff is the bomb. I need half a cup for every 5 gallons of water, according to the internet. This is a 10-gallon container. Probably won't be quite 10 gallons, so we'll put almost a cup in there. And then, one of my favorite features of this house, on-demand water. This might take a little while. My design was not perfect. I can in fact regulate the height of my hooks, but I neglected to take into fact that there are holes near the top of the Tupperware. I can't fill it as full as I thought I could. So this is just barely going to work. But anyway, so if all goes according to plan, just insert the skillet like so, and then negative goes on to the cast iron, positive goes on to the sacrificial anode. And we'll dry our hands before we plug this in. So this is just a 12-volt power charger that we got from our friend Kim. Man, just look at all those bubbles going. That's a sign the process is working. going for about a day now, and you can tell that clear water is kind of buggy at the moment. Let's take a look at what we've got here. First, just for reference, here's the piece of sacrificial anode. You can kind of tell how much crud is built up on this thing, right? And that's all stuff that's been transferred from the cast iron. We'll have to scrape that off every once in a while because it does insulate and cut down the flow of electricity. And the skillet itself, so you can see how cleanly that's coming off. That's definitely base metal there. That's definitely base metal in the middle. I think that the side is done. We'll flip it over and put it back in the tank. Alright. Now electrolysis is line of sight, so since I only have the one sacrificial anode, I have to do both sides individually. Okay, so we've taken it out of the electrolysis tank, and as you can see there's again, a buildup of that goo, but it comes off pretty easily. So a little bit of scrubbing, a little bit of loving wash, and we should have this thing back down to its bare metal. Okay, you can see that I've really made some progress here. There's still some caked on residue, old seasoning, old burnt food, whatever, in the corners here. Probably, if I had the patience to sit here with the scrubby and the steel brush, I could get the rest of this out. But the whole point of doing it with the electrolysis tank is to let the chemistry do the work. So back into the tank this goes. I do want to move quickly at this point, because as I mentioned earlier, bare metal cast iron will flash rust in just a few minutes. Alright, I'm going to get a couple of photos of this and we'll move on to boiling. So what we want to do now is cover the entire skillet in a very, very fine layer of oil. And there's no need to be fancy, I'm just using regular old canola oil here. The mistake people make is in using too much oil, and then rather than turning into a nice layer of hard seasoning, it turns into a big gummy mess. Alright, so we're just working this around, inside and outside. Want to be thorough, get all the nooks, all the crannies. Seasoning is part of what makes it fun to cook in cast iron, but it's also what protects the iron from rusting. So you don't want to skip anything. You don't want to have a cranny that's going to rust every time you use the skillet. And this includes the handle. Alright, so once you're relatively sure that you have got this thing oily inside out, on the edges and all over, you're going to do your best to wipe it all off. You start with a clean paper towel here, and then actually have a dedicated kitchen towel for wiping excess oil off of cast iron. People on the internet say wipe it like you're allergic to it. Alright, so now this is going to go in the oven. I'm going to set it face down so that if there is any running, because there's too much oil, which there's not, it won't cool in the bottom. Right? And I'm just going to turn it on to warm, leave it in there for about 10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to give it another wipe, because once it gets warm the oil will flow more easily and I'll be able to get a little more off. And then it will go in for the actual baking. Perfect. It's not so warm that it's going to hurt me, but that oil will have thinned out a little bit and I'll be able to wipe just a little more residue off of it. Now it's going to go back in the oven. We're going to crank the oven up to 450 degrees. We're going to wait for it to come up to temperature, and then we're going to leave the cast iron in there for a solid hour at 450 degrees. Then we're going to turn the oven off, and we're not going to touch anything until it's all cooled down. So since the lodge is in the oven and the tank is empty, we're going to go ahead and put the Wagner in and get it started, get all this old seasoning stripped off. So it's in much better shape than that lodge was, so hopefully it won't take quite as much physical effort. The tank will do all the heavy lifting for me. So we've been through a cycle of heating, baking, and cooling. Now let's pop that skillet out and see what we've accomplished. Just a little bit warm to the touch, like a piece of toast. Now if you look, that's what we've gotten so far. All right, we've got one layer of seasoning baked on there. The color shows true in the video. There's just a little bit of a red cast to this. It flash rusted just a little bit while it was in the oven. That's normal. It happens. I'm not going to worry about that at all. Most of it's just going to wipe right out when I put the next layer of oil on, which is what we're going to do right now. So just like the first time, we really want to make sure that we get the oil completely covering every little bit. Now the outside, I mean, if we miss that, you know, there's a little bit of rust in the future outside the skillet. That's not really that big a deal. But in here where the food is going to be, rust is undesirable. Of course, you don't want to forget the handle. Right, this is where your hand's going to be touching it and rubbing on the finish. If ever there's a spot likely to rust, that's the handle. Right, and once we've gotten a good sheen of oil all over it, once again we're going to try and wipe it dry, just as dry as we can get it. Alright, so I'm going to snap a couple of photographs of that, and then we're going to stick it right back in the oven so that this next layer of seasoning can bake on. Once again, cold skillet, cold oven. I'm going to put it in there, crank it up to 450 degrees, wait until it comes up to temperature, and then time it for an hour. Then we'll cut the oven off, we'll let it cool back down without opening it, and we'll be ready to start cooking with this one. Alright, so 2 days in the tank, one for the front, one for the back. Let's get it in the sink, scrub it up, and see how we're doing. Thing of beauty, yeah? Alright, we'll get this dried off and oiled up and into the oven. Okay, so we've gotten the oil wiped off as much as we can. Just a fine, fine sheen of it left. Cold piece of iron is going into the cold oven. Crank it up to 450. Face down, so that if it does drip, it doesn't pool to the bottom of the cooking surface. Let's do a little side-by-side comparison here. See what our labors have accomplished. So again, looking at this lodge, it started out pretty rusty, kind of beat up, and you can see the rust is all gone. The inside of the lodge is not smooth, but there's nothing I can do about that. That's the way it was manufactured. But again, if you just look at the colors here and a little bit at the texture, you can see there's an improvement. Now the Wagner, this is just a beautiful thing. So it started out, it wasn't in that bad a shape, but you can just look at how smooth and gorgeous it looks now that it's been cleaned and re-seasoned. I'm really looking forward to cooking with this one. So that's all there is to it. A little bit of electrolysis, a little bit of oven time, and I've got two beautiful brand new skillets ready to be used. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.